Today's passage comes from Mark chapter 13, verses 24 through 37. Hear the word of the Lord. But in those days after that suffering, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powerful ones, those in the heavens, will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud, with great power and glory. Then he will send out the envoys and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of the heaven. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that he is near at the very gates. Truly, I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But about that day or hour, no one knows, neither the messengers in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. Beware, keep alert. For you do not know when the time will come. It is like a man going on a journey, when he leaves home and puts his slaves in charge, each with his work, and commands the doorkeeper to be on the watch. Therefore keep awake, for you do not know when the master of the house will come, in the evening or at midnight, or at cockcrow or at dawn. Or else he may find you asleep when he comes suddenly. And what I say to you, I say to all, keep awake. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. A year ago, we began hearing about this novel coronavirus and its associated disease, COVID-19. We didn't know how it would affect our lives. We didn't know except that it was beginning to harm some people far off in China. We heard jokes about licking doorknobs in Wuhan, but we had no sense that it was really going to come and disrupt our day-to-day activities. Not long down the road, it began to interrupt our run-of-the-mill lifestyle. I began fielding questions about when the virus would run its course, when we would have effective treatments, when would we have a vaccine, when would life simply go back to normal. When can we get past this concept of pandemic and frustration and disorientation and go back to life as we had known it? We didn't know. We still don't know the ins and outs. We hear talk now of vaccines that are sounding promising, but they have yet to hit the market. We still don't know when they will come and put an end to the disruption that has impacted our lives. How do we keep on? Not knowing what is coming down the pike. Not knowing how our lives will continue to be impacted, in what ways they may continue to be impacted, or for how long. Today's passage in Mark's gospel is definitely not one of my favorites. I would just as soon not preach on it. I would prefer to go on and talk about other things which for me are much more pressing matters. And yet this passage needs to be addressed because there is so much talk and confusion on these matters regarding the end of the world, regarding the turmoil of our lives, regarding an understanding that some disruption lies ahead with the potential to dissolve life on earth as we know it. It's difficult for us to understand what Jesus is saying here in Mark's passage. We have to go to Matthew to get a little better context for Jesus' words. Mark was not there. His words are coming to us, filtered through Peter's sermons. From a time before the destruction of Jerusalem, and it would seem that Peter himself had not fully understood the ins and outs of Jesus' words. Less so Mark. It seems that we all want to believe that our particular Bible teacher or pastor or preacher has some insight that will unlock all the mysteries and tell us when things are going to happen and how the end of the world will come about and when the great things which prophets of old have described will somehow come to pass. Those expectations are pretty much for naught. There is no hidden meaning here. Jesus' words are clear enough, though they become clearer as we read other prophets like Joel, who spoke about this coming day of Yahweh. Becomes clear as we read Matthew's account, written some years after Mark's. Apparently with the clarifying knowledge of what had happened in Judea and Jerusalem with Jerusalem's destruction in AD 70. You see, Mark tells us that Jesus' words here were part of 3 questions he was answering. The disciples had pointed out to Jesus the wonderful constructions of the temple in Jerusalem, and he had said to them, "Not one stone here will be left standing upon another." And so when they separated from the crowds, they asked Jesus for more information about when will, quote, "these things be? And what is the sign of your coming and of the end of the world?" 3 distinct questions. And we have trouble sorting through Jesus' answer to understand what he was saying to us. We have trouble in part because we misunderstand the term here used for the end, which in other passages is phrased as the latter times, or the last hour, or the latter age, or the end of time. For the Jews divided time into 2 segments, before Messiah and after. And so the end of days, the end of time, the last hour would begin to take place when the reign of God, the messianic reign, would come to be inaugurated and begin to take shape upon earth. So no, Jesus was not talking about some cataclysmic doom scenario akin to that of our dystopian fantasy writers. Those notions come from extra-biblical sources, more akin to themes from Zoroastrianism and other speculative genres and mythologies that spoke of a world-ending battle between the gods. Now, Jesus' words here were focused on something much more relevant to his disciples in that first century. and the beginning of a new era that was about to come to pass. An era in which we live today that began long ago. Joel had spoken about this coming day of Yahweh. And Luke accounts for us that in Acts chapter 2, it began to be heralded and announced as inaugurated among the lives of the disciples and apostles as the Spirit of God was cast down upon them at Pentecost. And then he tells again how the Spirit came down upon others in Samaria as the church bore witness to Christ there as well. In Acts 10, we see the Spirit being poured out upon the Gentiles at the house of Cornelius. And then through Acts, we see the Spirit coming to other Gentile communities through the ministry of Paul and Apollos, of Prisca and Aquila. Now, these words of Jesus here recorded in Mark may seem a bit confusing to us because they do not portray what we expect them to herald. I recall back in junior high school, I was taking time to attend a church on Sunday evenings where the pastor, a noted professor, was going through the book of Revelation and attempting to open its secrets to us. And I attended with others, taking notes upon how the book of Revelation referred to, apparently, the conflict that was then looming in the United Soviet Socialist Republic, with different leaders of the Soviet Union, with the dragon portraying China's action against the church, with persecution aligned toward believers in Soviet Russia and in China and other parts. Russia being cast as the bear, the enemy that would come out of the north to destroy the land of Israel. It took some time for me to understand what my father was trying to tell me, saying I didn't need to be wasting my time. Because the book of Revelation was not a book to tell us about how the world is going to come to an end. It was never God's interest or intent to foretell the future for us, that we might know how to predict events before they come to pass. Sure, there was enough information available to us back in March of this year to know that the pandemic would last more than a few weeks within our nation. There were enough voices already saying that no, it was going to take a good year, year and a half, 2 years before it played out. We are seeing vaccines produced far ahead of schedule in terms of what we would normally expect from a vaccine coming to market. But they are not yet here. We still don't know how this will all play out. We are still learning to respond to the crisis before us today and shifting into new patterns of gathering ourselves, new ways to worship, new ways to respond and build and be community and live in community with others who find themselves strained, separated, isolated from friends, family, loved ones. These are uncertain times in which we live, and we fall upon texts like these today, attempting to ascertain the future as though that will give us hope when we know what to predict, what to expect, and how it will come around. That was not really Jesus' focus. He did warn the church about the impending destruction of Jerusalem and the temple there. But beyond that, he was simply concerned to tell them there is no time that you should know about. There is no sign for when the world as we know it will end. That song by R.E.M., "It's the End of the World," seemingly would be much more in line with the message of Jesus' words here than so much of what I grew up hearing. Jesus' words here are a message of hope. Amid counting and mounting disasters, amid uncertainties, amid pandemic, amid the stars falling from the sky seemingly, with the eruption of Mount Vesuvius burying Pompeii and covering 2/3 of the Roman Empire in ash. Amid the uncertainties, doubt, and frantic nature of populations desperate for answers, with the sky turning a strange color, the moon turning toward the color of blood, the sunlight giving a reddish glow. Amid calamity of wars on all edges of the Roman Empire, amid revolts and rebellions in Judea, Palestine, and beyond, Jesus' words are, these are nothing to fear. They are signs of nothing, despite what all the apocalypticists might have claimed. Simply know that after these things take place, Jerusalem will be destroyed, and you must leave. But of my coming, but of the advent of my reign, there is no sign. There is simply the responsibility for you to be prepared. It's the end of the world as we know it. But I feel fine. I will be okay. I have hope. Christ is still with us. There is still a future that God has prepared for us. And in the midst of the turmoil around us, God's reign is come upon us as we reach out with grace, compassion, and mercy. Where we prepare to feed 350 people and feed 900 instead, there is the reign of God, alive and well and operating. Oh, it may be the end of the world as we have come to know it, but there is hope for us. I feel fine. I find hope in the presence of Christ. Is that not sufficient for us to keep on? Oh, we don't know the ins and outs about that day. But we know that the reign of God is with us now and will continue carrying us through.